Hi, everyone. This is the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour, and I am E. Vingler. I'm coming coming to you from Jojage, which has long been a meeting place of various First Nations, otherwise known as Montreal. And the Canadian Foreign Policy Hour is a critical look at Canada's role abroad. And we've been doing this for about maybe 110, 120 weeks. So we have a bit of a community of critical thinkers on Canadian foreign policy. And yeah, so this week there are many developments in Canadian foreign policy that are worth discussing. And I guess I'll start off with the climate crisis. There's a Financial Times article, March temperature records unnerve scientists. New York Times, I think it was another one. Ocean heat has shattered records for over a year, leaving scientists blown away. So all the metrics with regards to increasing temperatures are going in the wrong direction, and we are spiraling very quickly. And Canada, of course, as I've mentioned many times, as well known, is very high per capita carbon emitter, far higher than, even 100 times more than many countries in Africa, and even dozens of times more than some countries in Asia. The National Post business section had a story, Calgary's Recon Africa accused of human rights violations in Namibia, Canadian oil company that's faced a lot of criticism for their ecological damage in their extraction. That's a story that's been getting attention for a few years now. On Haiti, the Transition Council that we've heard a lot about is there was an announcement that it was set up. This is to replace Ariel Henry, who said he was stepping aside after he was stopped about a month ago, a little over a month ago, I think, from returning to the country after going to Kenya to try to establish a foreign force for Haiti. And the U.S. kind of orchestrated, with Canada helping out, CARICOM, Caribbean Community Initiative, to come up with this transition council. And they got a lot of the opposition kind of forces in Haiti to agree to this. And Ariel Henry said he was going to step aside once the council was established. And effectively, it's just been sort of dragging on here. And there was a claim that it had been established, but in the Le Moniteur, the state paper, the kind of official announcement, and but then the opposition groups said they had totally changed the proposal that was agreed to on setting up this transition council that would oversee the country. I think there's 7 representatives from different sectors, 7 voting representatives, and 2 additional representatives that would not have voting status. And they're all criticizing that Henry had ignored the agreement. And it looks like the Americans and probably Canada is supporting this bid by Ariel Henry to basically maintain his totally illegitimate time in office. He's still in charge, even though he's not in the country. And so we should also point out that this transition council, as I've mentioned, is everyone on it. One of the things they have to agree to is they have to agree to the Kenyan-led foreign mission into the country. And that, of course, is something that many in Haiti don't agree with. So that's already a big concession, kind of a sellout, if you like. And also, they have to agree to accepting the results of elections, even though it's that's also a little bit controversial because there's a long history of ballot stuffing. The National Post launched a initiative on Saturday, which was published in all the Post media papers, titled "Heroes Among Us," and they basically about Canadian valor in wars. They mostly talk about somebody fighting in Afghanistan, and the fact that I guess it's the Victoria Cross that was established like 3 decades ago for the ultimate medal for valor in the Canadian military, and it's never been actually given out. And in this story, they say this is going to be this new series, and it's set up in conjunction with the True Patriot Love Foundation, somebody from Historica Canada, Canadian general, and a wealthy benefactor. The True Patriot Love Foundation is just a sort of pro-military body. Historica Canada, I talk about it a bit in my propaganda system book. They were established about 20, 25 years ago with this very militarist ethos in their description of Canadian history. And so here you have the Globe just sort of following with these militarist foundations, think tanks, whatever you want to call them exactly, in taking up this cause of Canada's heroes. And this was on the front page of the Saturday section, big long thing, and the whole section, there was like 4 or 5 articles in the section. I think pretty much everything in the section was all about these stories of Canadian military heroes. They had Rick Hillier, the former head of the Chief of Defense Staff, an extremist militarist individual who had a piece about the World War I, forgetting his name right now. He was the indigenous the sniper. He was like the best killer. He killed, like, I don't remember the number, like a couple hundred kills. He during World War I, he's claimed to have had, or is thought to have had, and so he's been in recent years, recent decades, as part of this like reconciliation. He's been talked about a lot as this sort of indigenous person upholding the Canadian military and the insanity of World War I and Canadian militarism. So the Globe or the National Post really playing on this militarist kind of ethos, which is pervasive, right? And as I'll get to later on in this, it's, even if you, before the NATO proxy war in Ukraine, even at a time when Canada wasn't officially at war, these militarist think tanks and institutes just have so much grip over the dominant media. But in this recent context, it's just remarkable. We see that all across, even like Le Devoir, with the Canadian announcement of military spending, everyone, the complaint, if there was a complaint, there was not more military spending. We weren't hitting the 2%. And just to see just how kind of the unanimity in the official media of, we're in this climate crisis, we have a massive housing crisis of need for huge amounts of social or co-op housing, and we're spending more on the military, and that's just viewed as just totally the right thing to do by across the media spectrum. On Palestine this week, the CBC published a piece about the countries that had aid workers killed with the World Food Kitchen. No, there's forgetting what the name of the group is now. This story talks about how all the other countries, Poland, the US, UK, there's another country in there, that they stated that they were unsatisfied with the Israeli investigation. And the only country that didn't do that was Canada, according to CBC. They refused to respond to Evan Dyer's questions on the matter. And there's been 200, the story points out, there's been 224 aid workers killed in Gaza over the past 6 months. 224. Just absolutely amazing. I think they said there's never been more killed in any conflict in a year, in any known conflict. I think that they said that in the article. There's another story. The Breach had a good story about the Canadian companies providing components for the F-35 that Israel is using to kill in Gaza, and also actually in Syria, which we'll get to in a bit. The Globe had a piece titled "Pressure Grows to Change Made in Israel Labels on Wines from West Bank," talking about this issue. This is obviously an issue that's been floating around for 5, 6, 7 years since David Kattenberg raised it. Wines coming from occupied West Bank, from illegal settlements, being labeled as Israeli wines. Kattenberg launched a case against that, and that played out. And the federal government, the Trudeau government, when the court ordered that there were proper labels on the wine. And this is not saying take them off the shelves, just saying label them that they're not made in Israel, not from Israel. And the Trudeau government took that to court, challenged that, and I believe it's still in the legal process. David Kattenberg and Dimitri Lascaris as his lawyer. But so the Globe covered that issue from a pretty pro-Zionist perspective. But no matter what, if you cover the issue, you're already raising this question of why the Canadian government and Canada allows these products, which we consider these illegal settlements, and the whole world considers them contrary to international law and war crimes, yet we allow products to enter Canada. In fact, we let them in duty-free through the Canada-Israel Free Trade Agreement. We accept Israel's domination in the West Bank under the Free Trade Agreement. We did as an action alert. I don't know this individual, Jarrett Martineau. I'm understanding he's a indigenous, somewhat prominent CBC host, and he got censored. He runs a show called Reclaimed, indigenous focused, I think, music show, and he got censored by CBC because he played a song called "River to the Sea," and I guess the pro-Israel lobby targeted him. So there was an action alert countering that the Canadian Foreign Policy Institute and I think it's called the Jewish Academic Network or Jewish Faculty, I forget the exact name of the group, put out. The Maple today had a piece. Here are the 10 MPs lobbied most by CIJA. And it points out that between October 7th and April 11th, CIJA, the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs, the main pro-Israel lobby group, held 107 separate lobbying sessions, 82 of which included discussions of international relations, meaning, of course, promotion of Israel. And they list the 10. It's interesting that 6 of the 10 are Jewish MPs. So CIJA really does view, and I guess there would be some sort of a chicken and egg question there with someone like Anthony Housefather, but they very much view Jewish MPs as sort of their surrogate to promote their pro-genocide policies. The Canadian Jewish News had a story titled "Peel School Board," Peel being the suburb of Toronto, school board add Nakba Remembrance Day to its calendar. They have a calendar, I think, of like multiple dozens of different days, and spurs objections from Jewish parents and the Ontario Education Ministry. So the Canadian Jewish News is saying that the fact that they're going to have a Nakba Remembrance Day is an outrage. And apparently there's been somewhat of a lobbying campaign against Peel to have this commemoration of Nakba, the Palestinian dispossession. And that goes to the real idea that like there's a big chunk of the Canadian Jewish community that it seems like what their Judaism is basically trying to erase Palestinians, promoting different initiatives that either erase them in the historical sense like this, or literally erase them in the sense of promoting what Israel is doing in Gaza. The National Post published this full-page ad signed by all these lawyers, and it was titled J'accuse, an open letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. And J'accuse, of course, comes from I think the book about the Dreyfus affair in 1890, which was a Jewish French general who was accused of treason. And I think it's pretty widely accepted that it was an anti-Semitic incident where he was unjustly accused and tried. And then the famous book titled J'accuse. Now, in this story, in this full-page ad in National Post, just totally unhinged, just completely unhinged, signed by like 30, 40, 50, I didn't count, of lawyers. I think they were all Jewish lawyers. And in this piece, it says, if our 250-year story in Canada is to end, and Jews decide to leave, it will be because they feel that they can no longer live safely and freely as Jews and choose to endure no longer the ceaseless anti-Semitism pervading every aspect of our life in Canada. I mean, this is just totally unhinged response to people who don't like the fact that Israel's slaughtering and starving people in Gaza. And this is the kind of stuff that's just the over-the-top, full-page ad in the National Post. So it's pretty damning kind of comment on a big segment of Canadian Jewry, that they're into publishing this kind of nonsense and paying for this nonsense to appear in the National Post. On a kind of similar note, Hampstead, the municipality in Montreal, on Monday, the city council passed this resolution saying they had no confidence motion in the Trudeau government for the House of Commons motion on March 18th that sort of slightly lessened Canada's enabling of Israel's genocide in Gaza. And they passed this motion. It got picked up in the Gazette. It got picked up in the National Post, the Suburban, number of media outlets. And they basically condemn the government. Most of it's about anti-Semitism rising. How dare the government contribute to rising anti-Semitism by maybe not selling any more new weapons to Israel. And it's in this piece, in the motion, they talk about persecution and discrimination. And this is like a comedy. I mean, maybe more than any municipality that I'm familiar with, this is an exclusive, wealthy municipality. So Hampstead, and I think I probably talked about this 5 months ago, when I challenged the mayor of Hampstead. I questioned the mayor of Hampstead back in December at this event, and I asked him if he supported killing of, at that point it was 4,000 Palestinian children. And then he said yes, and then went up 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000. And he said yes, he supported the killing of 100,000 Palestinian children because good needs to prevail over evil. And I said, what about if Israel dropped a nuclear bomb? And then he sort of finally kind of realized like where I was going. And, oh, that's a crazy idea. So he was taking this position of defend Israel no matter what. And so this is Hampstead. It's more than 3/4 Jewish. It has no commercial area or industrial area in the municipality. So it was set up 100 years ago by some of the wealthiest Canadians in 1914. Comes out of the Garden City movement of London, where the elite in London moved out of the center of the city. Garden City was big. I did a book on cars 15 years ago, and lots about that in the urban planning world. And it was a WASP. It was until World War II, it was totally WASP. White Anglo-Saxon Protestant. It was the elite of Montreal that lived in Hampstead. And basically, what's happened since World War II is the WASP community has been no longer there, and it's now more than 3/4 Jewish. And so it's this totally exclusionary kind of area. The like property taxes are like exceedingly high because there's no commercial or whatever industrial land paying any. So it's all individual houses paying property taxes. Apparently 16,000, almost 16,000 average per house in annual property taxes. And it basically, it's just like hub of elitist and pro genocide, pro Jewish supremacist kind of thinking that comes from this municipality. And yet they'll talk about persecution and discrimination while they put out this motion condemning the Trudeau government for possibly lessening Canada's role in the genocide. If it wasn't the fact that they know that they're insulated from criticism, right? People don't want to delve into the matter, but it would be just, people would just laugh this out of, like, you're a very wealthy, exclusive municipality claiming persecution. Like, just get over yourself. It's a comedy, but there's very little appetite for actually pushing back on these issues, because unfortunately it reinforces tropes, and there'll be a lot of people, even on the left, even in Palestine solidarity world, that are very uncomfortable about delving into some of these questions. Now, I thought I would devote most of this session to this situation, which I think I mentioned, I think last week, but it's just, to me, it's crystallized. We are possibly at the kind of early stages of World War III, right? And like, I'm not one inclined to kind of the hyperbole of these kind of things, and I still think we're at a very unlikely situation. We're still, 1%, whatever, but we're setting the basis. A number of things happen, and this whole thing can spiral. And the obvious place is with regards to Canada encouraging Israel to ignite a region-wide war. And I say that because the Canadian government, if you look at their reaction to that incredible escalation that Israel committed on April 1st, the Canadian government's reaction was silence. And it later came out, I think it just came out maybe on Tuesday of this week. I don't think I talked about it last week. It later came out that the Canadian embassy the windows were damaged. They were busted because the Canadian embassy is right next to the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Syria. And so when I think they said there's 6 strikes from Israeli F-35s, they killed two top Iranian generals and a number of others, including some civilians. And obviously it was a violation of Syrian sovereignty, but that's almost a daily affair for Israel. But it was also a huge violation of Iranian sovereignty, blowing up Iranian compound. And the Canadian government was quiet. Even though Canadian embassy with actual property was destroyed, still they refused. When Evan Dyer from CBC asked Global Affairs, they refused to have any comment on the matter. And so, but on the flip side, of course, when Iran retaliated on Saturday, within like minutes or hours, you had a statement from Prime Minister Trudeau, Minister Joly, and you even had a statement from the Trudeau statement is unequivocally condemned, so very strong language against Iran's shooting of missiles and sending drones to Israel. And even Jagmeet Singh joined in the condemnation. Yet nothing, including Singh, nothing about what this was a response to. Okay, now this is clearly encouraging Israel to, first of all, encourage Israel to commit the crime on April 1st, but also it's encouraging Israel to respond in a escalatory manner. That, of course, is going to lead to a response from Israel or from Iran, and probably from their ally in Lebanon, their principal ally, Hezbollah, which has the capacity, alongside Iran, has the capacity to seriously harm Israel. And that may well draw the U.S. Into it, even though Biden is saying he doesn't want Israel to respond in an escalatory manner. That it's likely that if, depending on the Israeli reaction, if Iran's reaction is a similarly hard one, it's likely that the U.S. would be could be drawn in. The Christian Zionist pastor John Hagee, the prominent, probably most prominent Christian Zionist in the U.S., and of course there's the John Hagee Ministries in Canada that Charles McVetti, there of Christian Canada College, or Canada Christian College in the suburbs of Toronto, heads up. Hagee said that the Iran's missiles are the prophetic start of the Gog and Magog war from the Bible that ends with Jesus returning and Jews killed or converted. He says he's going to travel to Washington, D.C. to lobby lawmakers not to de-escalate and to support Israel. And then, of course, he puts out a fundraising pitch to make some money off of the possibility of end times. So the Hagee seems to have his finger on the pulse of the possibility that this leads to a kind of Armageddon situation. There's a lot of ways in which this could go in terms of escalation. I think that when you look at the map of the world, geopolitical map, Russia has a lot of troops in Syria, and Israel and Russia have had this kind of like agreement to basically not target each other. So Russia doesn't stop Israel from blowing up Syrian sites, Iranian aligned groups, or whatever Israel wants to blow up in Syria. And they've been blowing up endlessly in Syria for multiple years. Apparently, they've already 33 bombings this year that Israel's committed in Syria. So Russia's kind of allows Israel to do that, even though they could deter. They have I think they have the certainly S-300. I think they have an S-400, the anti-missile kind of shield system in Syria, which is considered, I think, quite top of the line. They have sort of kind of gone along with this. Now, at some point, if Israel escalates their killings in Syria, and of course there's been a deepening relationship between Russia and Iran, because Iran has been selling drones to Russia that Russia's been using in Ukraine, you can definitely see a scenario where Russia responds to something that Israel did in Syria. If that were to happen, the chance that the US would not respond in some way seems to me pretty slim. And then, of course, you already have, if you look at the situation within Ukraine and look at what's gone on in Russia, a few weeks ago, Putin said this is no longer a special, doesn't refer to it as a special military operation, but now is a full-fledged war. You have this recent attack in Moscow. You have Ukraine bombing Russian oil facilities more and more. You have this certain type of escalation going on that front. And then you have Russia, of course, which has destroyed Kyiv's energy system, huge, crazy bombings, huge bombings of energy infrastructure in Ukraine in recent weeks. So you have, I think it's been pretty brutal for 2 years, but you have this kind of hardening of the Russian position. And then you have a situation that Russia looks stronger. So now they're saying that the Russian military, American officials saying the Russian military is actually 15% bigger than before the invasion. So from the Russians' perspective, they see themselves as their military is bigger. The economic sanctions haven't really worked in terms of crippling the economy. Yes, they haven't been as successful in Ukraine as they probably hoped. It's been a bit more of a grueling kind of war, but they would see their position as pretty solid right now. Then you have people like Macron talking about sending NATO troops into Ukraine, and so you have an escalation there that's developing. And the Canadian government, just today, the Canadian government announced 450 more Sky Ranger multi-mission drones to Ukraine. So the Canadian government, of course, is ramping up the proxy war. Has been obviously a big proponent for years, but it continues to kind of push that while that situation simmers. Alongside that, you have a potential theater with China, right? And you have today or 2 days ago, Canada, HMCS Montreal set sail for Indo-Pacific, obviously to join American vessels in the South China Sea, based there in Okinawa. You have the Canadian spy plane there. You have Americans putting special forces, kilometers away on that island, the Taiwanese islands, kilometers away from the Chinese mainland. You have, in recent days, right, the Japanese leader was in Washington, and they're deepening the alliance between the Philippines, Japan, basically all about targeting China, and Japan's significantly increasing its military spending, and it's made this agreement with Philippines, and the U.S. is kind of corralling their allies in the region to target China. So that's deepening, playing out, or talking about almost like a sort of an Asian NATO being set up, and of course China sees this all as a threat. And so if the situation with Iran builds, and then possibility of Russia getting involved in the Middle East, then you would find an increased pressure of China to ally further, deepen with Russia, Iran, possibly. So you have a whole bunch of factors now. And in Canada, with regards to China, I mean, our media has just been in a panic over the past weeks now on this whole Chinese interference thing. This is just like continues to be front page. They just rehash all these stories. The Han Dong story, a bunch on the front page this week. The Globe, National Post. There's a good piece in the breach around the Chinese interference thing. It's called The Big China Con. Very good piece that goes through is 3,000, 4,000, pretty long piece. Goes through all kinds of the details and kind of the dubious claims around the Chinese interference in Canada. Now, it's fascinating what it doesn't do, which is it just totally leaves out the geopolitics. The only thing that the kind of like explanation of like the why this would be ratcheted up is that when Xi became president, that China took an authoritarian turn. So nothing about Obama's pivot towards Asia, nothing about this sort of U.S. empire's increased focus on China. To me, that's the central factor in this whole Chinese interference thing. It's not that, there is this whole history of CSIS going back years and years, going after China, going after Canadians who had associations with China and trying sort of similar dynamics that they're doing now. To me, what's given this its much greater legs is the fact that it's fitting in with this push by the U.S. empire to target China. So amidst this whole the China kind of craziness in the Canadian media, the National Post guy who I'm just blanking on his name right now, who was a former kind of lefty, used to be at the Vancouver Sun, actually worked with my dad at the Vancouver Sun decades ago. Terry Glavin has a piece where he says that 2017, the Financial Times got hold of a training manual issued by the United Front Work Group, Beijing's mammoth foreign influence and overseas strong arming agency. The manual boasted that 6 of its candidates were elected in the GTA, the Toronto area, in 2003 and 2006. 10 out of its 44 favored candidates won elections to public office. So Glavin is basically claiming that China's had a bunch of, they've gotten a bunch of people elected going back more than 20 years in the GTA. And so this is where this stuff's going, right? I mean, China's been running Canada for the last, since 1949, since the Chinese Revolution. The Communist Party of China has basically been running Canada. This is almost like, where these people are like kind of going with. But so from a Chinese perspective, this is just all this target China kind of over the top. And then you have you have a situation where the front page of today's Globe and Mail is military chief touts greater focus on Arctic amid moves by China, Russia. So this new defense policy statement about that's what's it called, Our North Strong and Free, that it's heavily focused on China and Russia. So you got increased military spending because of China and Russia, and that's on the front page with the head of the military saying that. And Bill Blair is the defense minister today, tweeted out, the Arctic is warming at 4 times the global average and becoming more accessible, all while Russia and China are building up their capabilities. Through Our North Strong and Free, we're making generational investments to protect Canadian sovereignty. There's nothing hidden anymore. We are putting more money into the military because of China and Russia, which, about a year ago now, the chief of the defense staff said that China and Russia see themselves at war with Canada, which was another way of saying that Canadian military sees itself at war with China and Russia. So you put all these things together of we're increasing military spending because of China and Russia. You have a situation ignites in the Middle East where Israel is trying to prod the US into war with Iran. That could potentially lead Russia into it via Syria. That then escalates what's going on in Ukraine. China feels like it's being targeted by the US and its allies. And anyways, you could see where the spiral goes. Very unlikely still, but a 1% chance is beyond why? So Israel can keep killing Palestinians in Gaza? Why would we play with this kind of fire? Obviously, we know that the U.S. empire, the military companies, the security establishment, those concerned about world domination. This is the type of thinking that they have. As I was thinking about this today, I was thinking to myself that, well, let's hope the capitalists save us, because at this point, it seems like the most likely force to restrain this insanity is those who want to operate exploitation-minded capitalism, rather than those that want to a sort of militarist-minded capitalism, or just a military kind of empire policy. And it's a pretty grim situation when we have to be hoping that the people like the heads of Barrick Gold will push back on the anti-China craziness. But I think that there is some truth in that idea that there is that's in the short term the force that's leading us away from not getting down even more of this kind of crazy geostrategic conflict-oriented policy. Now, the much more hopeful and exciting force that could avoid this type of situation is the mobilizations, which continue today here in Montreal. There was, I think they were able to, early in the morning, 6 something, they organized to meet up to try to go at the port. The cops were really aggressive from what I heard. But some people did get to the port and were able to shut down part of the port for about an hour. I heard that reports are that in Delta, in Vancouver area, they were able to blockade the port there for a while. There was a occupation of the Scotiabank office here in Montreal, about 30 people inside, and there was about 75 of us outside, a couple hours rallying. And I know there were actions targeting arms companies across the country today, and I believe around the world. There are all kinds of other initiatives that go in this light. There's an initiative people should check out, the Just Peace Advocates and Independent Jewish Voices parliamentary petition around no more subsidies for Israeli crimes, that goes at the charities question, which is, I think, a very good initiative. There is Matthew Green has this Nakba bill consultation. I'll maybe share one of these actions I was able to do on on Friday.
Minister Farad, how many Palestinian children have to be killed before you call for a two-way arms embargo? How many Palestinian children have to be killed? How many Palestinian children have to be killed, Minister Farad? You're part of a government that's enabling a Holocaust in Gaza. Minister Farad.
So that was at this press conference, challenging the tourism minister. I actually also was able to challenge Guilbeault at that event. It was pretty funny to see him sort of scuttle away. There's this increased kind of repressive response. I think that a story today about Toronto police charging Desmond Cole, prominent Toronto activist, for something he did something he was involved with in January at a Palestine demonstration. The cops' reaction here in Montreal, and I think that there's been in the last couple of weeks a heightening of the repressive response to the mobilizations. And I think that because of what's happened on the weekend with Iran, I think that was ramped up even more today. And I expect that there's a good chance that there will be a greater effort. Certainly the demonization is going to grow. You are all supporters of the Iranian regime, this kind of angle. They've kind of maxed out on their anti-Semitism angle, and they're going to, I think, probably more and more of the Iran element. In Quebec, they passed they announced a law to explicitly, basically, for hassling politicians, and you can be fined $1,000. There's some latitude, and the politicians are able to get a like sort of a restraining order against individuals. It includes something where if city council meetings are disrupted, they can fine you for I think between $50 and $500. So there's new powers to kind of repress. And when this was reported on, I was sent to it. Laurel, one of the people who's a regular on the Foreign Policy Hour here in Montreal, she sent me this thing saying, "Is this targeted at you?" And then this the person from MIGS, the Montreal Institute for Genocide Studies, who really clearly doesn't like me, she posts on Twitter about this law and basically says it's because of people like me hassling politicians. And then on Friday, when I was at that press event that I just showed you, thing from the tourism minister Farada, I ended up, the police became very aggressive. They obviously wouldn't let me inside, but the visual was to the street. It was actually just like a half block from my house. It happened to be this press conference with all these ministers, provincial, federal, the mayor of Montreal, all there. This housing announcement, and so after trying to ask them questions on their way in, while the press conference was going on, I stood outside on the street in front of the window where the cameras were pointed, and I just held a sign saying "Free Palestine," and I yelled about their complicity in genocide. And then the police came over. I mean, I'm just on the street, standing there, yelling. There's absolutely nothing illegal with what I'm doing. And then the police come over and they claim that I'm not supposed to be there, or this. And then when I keep doing it, they say I'm now in their face, even though they literally came half block over to target me. And then I get in this conversation with the sergeant in this neighborhood who was kind of the aggressive one on all this, and how he justifies what he's doing. He said, well, there's all this concern about politicians being hassled, and basically he's kind of picking up on the reports, both in the media and then the bill that the provincial governments bring in around harassment of politicians and how this is a danger to our democracy. And so he's using that to justify stopping me from holding a sign, when there's 10 cops at this press conference, as if I was any physical danger to any politician. Literally, there's Sûreté de Québec there, there's SPVM Montreal Police there, and it's just me. they're uses this to justify not allowing to have a sign. So of course it creates this climate of repressive kind of feeling. But nonetheless, that's all we got here. If we want to lessen Canada's role in encouraging Israel to ignite regional war, which who knows where that regional war could go. We have to be disruptive. We have to be mobilized. We have to be getting bigger and bigger demonstrations. I'll leave it at that, and I'll make Laura, sorry, if she's here, I'll make her a co-host, and if anyone has questions or comments, go ahead. Go ahead. You should be unmuted and co-host.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I wasn't able to unmute there. So I did just want to ask you what you think. I know BRICS is really more of an economic alliance, but do you think the fact that Iran and several of the Arab countries, Russia, China, do you think that BRICS is in any way going to have an influence in terms of what happens vis-a-vis Iran?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there's the Arab countries that are hosting U.S. bases, Bahrain, Qatar, probably Jordan as well. The fact that Iran has said they're going to basically, their targets if the U.S. gets involved. They've said their airspace is not to be used to target Iran. I don't know that South Africa, for instance, or Brazil are going to play much of a role in the short term. I mean, I think both those countries are saying, more or less the right things about what's been going on in Gaza, and have understand that this is on Israel. This is Israel that's the aggressor. I know that Russia, I don't know the exact comments, but basically my understanding is the Russian foreign ministry said that this was a appropriate response from Iran, and I believe that China said something similar. I don't know what the South African or Brazilian reaction has been to Iran's response. But yeah, I mean, I think that the BRICS restrains it a little bit, but I think the people who are running the Israeli government are these are some serious fanatics. And they've shown they're willing to test things, and from Israel's perspective, it's the bully. They get to do what they want to do, and everyone else is supposed to take it. And that's been their modus operandi. That's how things have been, certainly for recent many decades now. And so it's a problem for, I mean, I mean, I obviously don't, I think Israel should just basically stop, not react, not respond to Iran. But I understand from an Israeli perspective and the whole quote unquote deterrence and all this kind of language. I mean, they are supposed to be the ones that get to commit the violence, and so this Iranian response, which is significant, but measured,
yeah.
That Israel kind of needs to respond, right? Like from their logic that the Israeli state is organized in. And so, but yeah, I don't know, so what the BRICS would ultimately, how big a role it would play. I think that Russia and China are going to be putting some degree of pressure, though probably fairly minimal on Israel to not be too crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think China's going to really get involved in things like that. So, Sandhu, I'm sorry, can you unmute again? I'm sorry, I think we're undoing each other. Okay, great. Okay, go ahead, Sandhu.
Yeah, Eva, I just want to take a kind of a little bit of a different approach on this because I've been watching the drama around the whole the embassy in Damascus and then, the Iran's response. And if you really kind of pay close attention to, the US and the BRICS are basically just saying they want to reduce the tension. So India, Brazil, South Africa, the line is we need to reduce the tensions. But it seems to me almost that, it was Netanyahu's attempt to expand, obviously, because the Gaza thing is now sort of kind of petering out and, he could end up going to jail as soon as that's over. And I think that Iran as well, there was no retaliation from Hezbollah, from anything, sort of bombs or drones, flying into the Negev. It wasn't as if it was more a demonstration of, don't mess with us. And, we're compelled to respond, but not necessarily a kind of, okay, game is on. So it just feels like a affected and a kind of a well-planned, orchestrated type of thing, which, okay, you've had your say. The U.S. is in no position to fight anybody right now, I would imagine, but with the fronts open up in Russia and so forth. So I was taken by that with a muted. Iran has already declared that, okay, we've done our part. We taught them a lesson. The Israeli war cabinet met 2 days in a row and haven't made any statement with respect to, how they're going to respond back. Because they're kind of like chest thumping, but really, I think this is probably, my sense is that we've kind of seen the worst of it with respect to Israel's attempts to expand the war effort. What do you think? Do you think I'm off?
Well, I mean, I think there's going to be some Israeli response. I think that Israel is going to have to do something in response. They're too much tied into this militarist, bully ethos to just do nothing. Now, do they do the minimum response that allows for, not a significant response from Iran? If I was a betting person and you're giving me even odds, that's where I would put my money. But does that mean that it's that 70% chance that they go to something like that and a 30% chance they go to something more escalatory in response? Maybe. Maybe it's even 90-10. So clearly that's what Iran wants. That I completely agree with you that how Iran organized this the drones and the missiles and the time and basically telling them in advance, only targeting 2 bases. It was designed to sort of do as little damage of, any sort of PR, right? Like trying Israel using people being killed or that kind of stuff, the PR, the sides to that stuff. But I also believe that you have both serious, I don't know if you call them zealots or fanatics in the Israeli cabinet, and then you have Netanyahu who has this sort of personal stake, and then you have a broader logic to Israeli militarist bullying. You bring that, that's not just held by what we would consider extremists or whatever. That's kind of held more broadly among the Israeli military establishment. You bring those things together, and I think it's plausible to imagine something that is a more just an escalatory dynamic, and then leads literally the response after that is not the full Iranian response or Hezbollah response, but the response after that is well, okay, they a whole bunch of missiles are launched into Israel that actually do kill hundreds of people, and then Israel, next step up, and that I think is totally plausible. And when you have a situation where the G7, I mean, I think that you're seeing that Biden and Cameron, the British Foreign Secretary, kind of telling Israel to hold back type of thing, but they are also simultaneously like Israel is the victim in all this, right? And so Israel has to feel you can make a plausible argument within Israel that they're gonna back us. Oh yeah, the Americans say they're not, and the other countries say they're not, but they're going to back us, right? And if Israeli military commanders believe that, or top security officials believe that, then go heavy, go for a bigger response. That to me is a totally plausible scenario. Though I agree with you. If I was going to bet on it, I would bet more that it's going to, at least for the short term, calm down. But then the next part is like, there's no evidence that Israel is planning on calming down in Gaza. So long as that is simmering as well, right? You just have constant tension, whether it's the Ansar Allah, the Houthis in Yemen, whether it's right, you just have constant tensions playing out. Lebanon, I mean, they've been blowing up, more and more in Lebanon as well, right? So, and clearly Israel's not succeeding in Gaza. They're not doing. I mean, they're succeeding in the sense of making the place unlivable and killing lots of people, but they're not succeeding in actually destroying Hamas or even getting those captured. So yeah, I think that the whole situation is almost for sure it's going to be simmering for quite a while. Hopefully it's not going to go escalate another notch, but I do think it's totally plausible that does happen.
Well, it could, because in the US there's a push now to really get that 14 billion in aid very quickly through to Israel, bipartisan.
And we should just remember what that bill has, right? It's money principally to Ukraine proxy war. There's some.
They're gonna extract it from that to get to the Israel, is what I was meaning, Eve. There's that big.
Is that confirmed? Is that actually confirmed?
No, it's not confirmed. But they were talking about today that the Republican speaker, because there's overwhelming support for everybody, bipartisan for Israel, that they're going to try to extract that 14 billion and just pass that, and that's all military aid.
Oh.
Go ahead, Yuri.
Hey, Eve. So my question, I have three questions. Is there's all this popular outcry against Israel, and a lot of our politicians, particularly in Britain, Australia, I don't know about New Zealand, but certainly in Canada, the US, lots of politicians are being confronted because of their complicity of what's happening in Palestine. But do you think that the liberals will? Do you think that the current makeup of the Canadian Parliament, will the Liberals get reelected? Given they've passed pharmacare and dental care, and I've been having lots of arguments, with my mom about Trump, v. Biden, and what would you do in that scenario, given that Biden is so complicit in the Holocaust in Gaza, but the choices are basically him and Biden? And do you think that that longtime NDP MPs like Charlie Angus and Randall Garrison, who aren't running for re-election, will this be a gain for the Liberals or Tories? And then my final one, which you don't have to answer because it's a lot of questions, is have the Quebec Bloc have they been met with any protests and confrontations, given their complicity also in supporting Israel? And yeah, I'm curious your response on that.
Yes, well, no, I don't think there's been almost any pushback against the Bloc Québécois. They've kind of sort of been pretty quiet, though they've been kind of come out now, supporting that NDP motion, the original version of the NDP motion. So they've come out to kind of a better position now. Interestingly enough, that the PQ in the provincial and of course Quebec Solidaire have the PQ just yesterday came out against the economic bureau that the CAC government set up in Tel Aviv. That just it was planned like maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, but it had sort of slow motion and it was just sort of set up fairly recently. And so anyway, the PQ came out calling for that to be basically disbanded. That's kind of interesting. I think a positive development. Now, I don't know. I mean, I think that all the official, I don't have any particular knowledge about where the elections are all going to go, but I think all the official thing is that, people are tired of Trudeau and Poilievre is going to probably win. And at this point, I don't see a particularly strong reason to dispute that. It has been a long time with Trudeau, 10 years. That's not uncommon for people sort of just to get tired of governments at that point. All these NDP MPs leaving, I don't really know. It goes into the specific ridings. Like Randall Garrison is one of those weird ones where it's, I think that's a three-way race. That's actually like NDP Green Conservative race. So probably the Conservatives are best placed to win that. But yeah, the other, I don't know enough about the other ridings, the particulars of each one to know what that kind of stuff means. Yeah, I mean, clearly the Liberals are, trying to make lots of announcements around, sort of like, I don't know, sort of social democratic kind of announcements around housing, pharmacare. It's pretty minimal kind of stuff. Ultimately, I don't know if it's going to change the tide of sort of conservative momentum. But the elections are also quite a ways away, so things can change a fair bit. I don't know about Palestine. With regards to the Trump Biden thing, I mean, that is a tricky one. Like if I was in Michigan and there was like, if this keeps going and Biden keeps supporting Israel and killing and I think I probably would just take I'm not voting Democrat, even if I think, Trump's worse. And that there needs to be some sort of like punishment of Biden for what he's done on Palestine specifically, and especially if there is like momentum that can actually make it feel like, if you can say that, hey, you lost the presidency because of your Palestine policy, because 50,000, 80,000 people in Michigan wouldn't vote for Democrat, who usually vote Democrat, wouldn't vote for, just abstained or voted for third party because of the Palestine stuff. That would have a message that reverberates, I think, beyond a one-off election message that has some value. I'm generally in that kind of that domain of, like, when it comes to electoral politics, of just the less bad, right? And that it's like, don't put too much stake in it and just vote. If I was in a riding where it was like a conservative liberal battle, and I would probably vote for the Liberal. I mean, so I talked about that once. If I was in Pierre Poilievre's riding, or not Poilievre, the guy from the People's Party, the former conservative cabinet, the guy in Quebec.
Maxime Bernier.
Yeah, Maxime Bernier. If I was in his riding, I might even vote conservative. I might even vote a conservative to, just less bad kind of situation. So, but I think those things matter. What matters to me in some of that stuff is if there is actually like a move, like if not voting Biden in a swing race just is not part of something, that to me is distinct from if it's actually part of something, right? If it's part of, like, okay, we are not, the whole uncommitted kind of dynamic where there's a message being sent that this, it's not just about this election, it's about longer term, and say, you're playing with fire if you well, both if you're too pro-Israel, but also if you just ignore the anti-war activist base, however you want to frame that exactly, that there's a message being sent. Yeah.
Catherine, go ahead. So this will be the last question, I guess. Eve, go ahead, Catherine.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to mention that we heard on the radio there were 21 people arrested in Halifax for blocking a street in solidarity with Palestine today. And 2 people called into our local Maritime Noon call-in show, which was about pharmacare. Not pharmacare, a pharmacist was on answering questions and just interrupted the show and talked about asking people to go down to the police station in Halifax and join them. And of course, we're too far away, a 2-hour drive from here. But I also just wanted to confirm, amplify your message, Eve, about the kind of police repression it's just amping up. And I mean, it doesn't seem like you have to do much to risk arrest these days. I was in New Glasgow passing out leaflets outside of RBC about their, it was for before, but it was in conjunction with the Fossil Fools Day event, trying to oppose their investments in fossil fuels, trampling on indigenous rights, and funding the genocide in Palestine. And a police officer came and told me he wanted my information and threatened to arrest me and charge me with obstructing a police officer if I didn't give him all my information, just because of a complaint from the bank for passing out leaflets. So, and
Yeah,
thank you.
Yeah, I think I'd seen that actually about Halifax, and that was about it seemed like a pretty disproportionate response, and they arrested a whole bunch of people at the bank here in Scotiabank here in Montreal today. I mean, I think that specifically that's been building on Palestine, but I do think that the Iran element is going to add a whole other, and if it does feel like we're, if that escalates, we should expect there would be even greater efforts to repress anti-war kind of mobilizations. Of course, we have to be conscious of that, but also fight through that and do our best not to let that deter us. But I think that if things escalate geopolitically, we should definitely expect the police forces to ramp up their repression as well. So thanks.
That's it. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening. Same
Thank
place,
you.
same time next week. Take care.
Bye. Bye.